Good afternoon. Just starting off with some sad news which we've just received from our peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic, where earlier today a peacekeeper from Rwanda was killed when his unit came under attack by members of an unidentified armed group. When the unit was attacked, the peacekeepers were on patrol, providing a protective presence around the town of Sam-Ouandja in the Haute Kotto prefecture. The peacekeepers returned fire, and according to initial reports we've received, 3 of the assailants were killed. We add our voice to that of the head of the peacekeeping mission, Valentine Rugwabiza, in strongly condemning this attack. We extend our deepest condolences to the family of the fallen peacekeepers, his colleagues, as well as the people and government of Rwanda, and we do expect a more formal statement today. The incident today follows the rapid deployment of peacekeepers to the town of Sam-Ouandja last week in response to an attack on the town by an armed group, which fled after an initial intervention by peacekeepers. Over the past 5 days, the mission has expanded its security perimeter around the town to protect the community and support the safe delivery of humanitarian aid. The special representative has confirmed that the peacekeepers will remain in place in Sam-Ouandja. The mission is engaging with national authorities for the deployment of national defense and security forces to consolidate the authority of the state in the area. Sorry, and I meant to start, of course, with telling you that our guests today will be Li Juanhua, the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Francesca Perucci, the Assistant Director of the Statistics Division of DESA, and Astra Bonini, the Senior Sustainable Development Officer in the Division for Sustainable Development Goals of DESA. They will brief you on the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals report, specifically on the key findings of the report, this year's report. Using the latest available data and estimates, this report provides both a snapshot of the SDGs' progress, highlighting the gaps that exist, and urging the world to redouble its efforts to achieve the SDGs. Going back to peacekeeping in Africa, our peacekeeping colleagues in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are telling us that the Force Intervention Brigade wrapped up a month-long operation which was conducted jointly with the Congolese armed forces in the provinces of Ituri and North Kivu, and that was meant to deter threats against civilians and prevent further expansion of armed groups, including the ADF. The operation began in early June and has covered key areas in both provinces. The mission reports that peacekeepers will continue to conduct follow-up patrols, which have helped civilians to move freely and deny movements of armed groups in the area. Quick humanitarian update for you on Syria, on deliveries of goods to northwest Syria. Today, 79 trucks moved through the Bab el-Hawa crossing. They were carrying humanitarian supplies from the World Food Program, the International Organization for Migration. Another 19 trucks loaded with aid went through the Bab el-Salam crossing. Since the February 6th earthquake, more than 3,700 trucks carrying aid from 7 UN agencies have crossed into northwest Syria through 3 available border crossings. As of today, we have also completed more than 150 cross-border missions to the northwest since the first interagency visit to Idlib on February 14th. As you're aware, the Security Council authorization for cross-border operations under Resolution 2672 expires today. The Secretary General has called for a 12-month renewal of that authorization, and we continue to advocate for expanding all avenues to deliver humanitarian assistance to millions of people in northwest Syria. Thanks, Ron. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that yesterday civilians were killed and injured while receiving humanitarian aid in yet another attack on the front lines of our Kyiv and Zaporizhzhia region in the southwest of the country, the southeast of the country. As confirmed by the UN's Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, 4 civilians were killed in the attack. efforts to continue to verify reports of further civilian casualties are continuing. The attack destroyed a drinking water distribution point installed and maintained by partners of the Ukraine Humanitarian Fund, which is administered by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Denise Brown, strongly condemned the attack, reminding that civilian infrastructure, and humanitarian assets must be and are protected under international humanitarian law. Our humanitarian colleagues note that residents in Orikhiv have been living under constant shelling for months. The families have been forced to take cover in basements, emerging only briefly to receive essential humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, humanitarians continue to deliver vital aid to those who need it the most, including in frontline communities. On Friday, an interagency convoy brought medicines, shelter materials, and hygiene kits to Lyman town in Donetsk region, Oblast, in the east of Ukraine, which has been exposed to continuous shelling. It was the 23rd interagency convoy to date this year to reach Donetsk region, where humanitarian needs remain high due to the ongoing hostilities. Moving on to Sudan, today the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, is in Addis Ababa, where he was invited by the International Authority on Development in Eastern Africa, otherwise known as IGAD, to take part in its Quartet Heads of State and Governments meeting on Sudan. They discussed how to address challenges in providing humanitarian aid to people in need, both inside Sudan and in neighboring countries, which have sheltered those fleeing the ongoing fighting in Sudan. Mr. Griffiths stressed the need to expand access and lifting the bureaucratic impediments to allow more aid to reach people who need it. On the ground, we and our partners continue our efforts to reach Sudanese communities with life-saving assistance, and the World Health Organization announced today that a chartered flight carrying 18 tons of medicines and medical supplies arrived in Port Sudan. The shipment also includes trauma and emergency medical supplies. Also on Sudan, just a reminder, you will have seen that over the weekend, the Secretary General condemned the attack in Omdurman in Sudan and offered his condolences to the families of the victims. He also said he is appalled by the large-scale violence and casualties we're seeing across Darfur. The statement noted that, quote, an utter disregard for humanitarian and human rights law is both dangerous and disturbing. The Secretary General remains deeply concerned that the ongoing war between the armed forces has pushed Sudan to the brink of full-scale civil war, potentially destabilizing an entire region. Crossing the waters and going to Yemen this morning, the Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, briefed Security Council members on the situation there. He said that despite the expiry of the truce, the Yemenis continue to feel the benefits from the longest period of relative calm since the beginning of the conflict, and that this period of relative calm has opened the door for serious discussions with Yemeni actors on the way forward towards ending the conflict. Also briefing was the Deputy Humanitarian Emergency Relief Coordinator, Joyce Masuya. She told council members that the humanitarian needs in Yemen will remain high for the foreseeable future, and she called on the parties to fulfill its obligations to facilitate the rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian aid. And she reminded that council members that the humanitarian response plan for Yemen is funded at just 29% this year. Also briefing with some good news was the UN resident coordinator for Yemen, David Gressley. He spoke about the status of the Safar operations around the Safar tanker. He said that the Sana authorities provided authorization today for the oil transfer from the Safar to the replacement vessel, which is good news, adding that the replacement vessel, the Nautica, is preparing to sail from Djibouti. It will moor alongside the Safar and should begin taking on oil by early next week. Once the transfer starts, that will take about 2 weeks. He noted that since the salvage vessel Endeavour arrived next to the Safar site on the 30th of May. Salvage company that was contracted by UNDP has done everything possible to stabilize the decaying Safar tanker and prepared for the removal of 1 million barrels of crude oil. Turning to the occupied Palestinian territory, the humanitarian coordinator for the UN there, Lynn Hastings, visited the Jenin refugee camp over the weekend, joined by representatives of a number of member states. Our humanitarian partners have concluded an initial damage assessment following last week's operations by Israeli forces, indicating that 460 housing units were damaged in and out of the camp. Of these, 70 housing units were destroyed or otherwise rendered uninhabitable. At least 40 families remain displaced. The camp remains largely without running water, necessitating temporary solutions, which includes water trucks. Humanitarian teams, including from UNRWA, are also providing emergency assistance, medical supplies, and mental health assistance. And in Haiti, our humanitarian coordinator there, Ulrika Richardson, strongly condemned rising violence against medical staff and facilities in and around Port-au-Prince and throughout Haiti. Attacks on health care the humanitarian community calls on all parties involved in attacks on health care to immediately cease all forms of violence against the population and humanitarian infrastructure, while urging respect for the neutrality of healthcare facilities and their staff. More online, and very pleased to announce that the Secretary General has appointed Marc-André Franche of Canada as the new resident coordinator for Sri Lanka. Mr. Franche has 24 years of experience in the UN, and his work is focused on boosting development, coordinating among UN agencies, funds, and programs. He started on Saturday following the confirmation by the host government, and we congratulate Marc-André. Just want to flag that the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, otherwise known as the HLPF, started today, will go on until Wednesday, 19 July. The 3-day ministerial segment of the forum will take place on 17 July to Wednesday, 19 July. This year's theme is Accelerating the Recovery from COVID and the Full Implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development at All Levels. The meeting will also support the midterm review of the SDGs and preparation for the SDG Summit in September. Just got fresh payments to the regular budget from landlocked countries in Latin America. An interesting fact about this country is that for being a nation without a coastline, it has a strong naval tradition. Its navy has access to the Atlantic Ocean through Argentina, and the Itaipu Dam on the river Paraná, which it shares with Brazil, is one of the world's biggest working hydroelectric power plants, and it's actually an amazing place to see. And what country are we talking about? Yes, Edie Lederer. What? I love the dam. It really is a sight to see. So we thank our friends in the capital of
Asuncion.
Edie, man. Yeah. It was a restful weekend for Edie. Please, Edie Lederer, Associated Press.
Thank you, Steph. Last week, Martin Griffiths said that Rebecca Greenspan would like to go to Moscow this week to talk about cross-border, and he would like to go to Istanbul to meet with, not cross-border, what am I talking about the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And, sorry.
Too many deals going on.
Right. Too many deals going on is right. And he would like to go to Istanbul to meet with the parties to the initiative. Can you give us any update on what's happening, and is the Secretary General himself involved? Is he making any phone calls?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't have any information on travel to share with you, but I can tell you, I spoke to the Secretary General about this morning. He is deeply involved, as are Rebecca and Martin, in doing whatever we can to ensure the continuation of all of the agreements and to ensure full implementation of what has been signed, whether it's the Black Sea Initiative or the ODMOU, given its importance in the fight against global hunger. Michelle, then Pam.
Is Russia engaging with the UN at all?
We are, I mean, throughout this, we've been engaged with all the critical parties, notably the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and Turkey.
But we're a week out now from the expiration of this deal. We don't know if Rebecca Greenspan's going to Moscow.
I mean, we've been a week out from the extension at a number of points along the way. It's high stakes. So
Has the SG spoken with
Yeah.
President
I'm not going to
Follow-up.
get into any conversations that he's had. Pam.
Thanks, Steph. A follow-up as well. On Sunday, there was a report that Ukraine sources said that the Turkish Navy will protect ships from the Russian Navy in the Black Sea corridor, even if Russia withdraws from the grain deal. Any comment on that?
No.
Would that be
I
possible?
don't have any comment. I mean, that seems to be like questions you should ask the Ukrainians and the authorities in Turkey.
What, I mean, given what you know, I know you don't like to make predictions, but any sense that it might move along?
No,
even with
I
resistance?
think your last sentence was the correct one. Deji.
I'm going to ask a different topic. WMO just announced that, according to its data, the world just had the hottest week on record, following the hottest June on record. As a matter of fact, last Monday and Tuesday, it's also the hottest day. So, any reaction from the Secretary General on this very how would I say, concerning trajectory on this temperature?
Well, I don't think the data is surprising. What remains disappointing is the lack of action by people who need to take action, given all the data that we're seeing. I mean, we're continuing to see extreme weather. I mean, I came back to the States yesterday. We saw the storms here in New York State. I think there was one fatality. I mean, I was home in France. There was a lot of extreme weather, storms in different parts of the country. And I mean, we're seeing it, we're all seeing it with our own eyes. And it's all being backed by very clear data from impartial scientists. Yes, go ahead. No, please, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Betul.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Steph. First, a follow-up on Yemen. David Grizzly said that ship-to-ship transfer of oil from the decaying tanker off the coast of Yemen will start early next week. Can you just remind us, once the transfer is completed, what will happen to the oil? Who's going to use it? The Yemenis or the UN?
The oil will stay there. I think those are still issues that need to be worked out. Our focus right now, and has been, I think you've heard me talk about this for a few years now, is to avoid an ecological disaster. We've had 1 million barrels of oil stuck on this tanker, which is decaying, and we're very close to actually completing that. And I think we all very much hope that the operation will succeed. And I know all of those involved, Mr. Gressley's teams, the UNDP team, and the contractors that we've provided, with the support of all the parties in Yemen. I think everyone is working in the same direction.
And back to my second question. Last week at the Security Council, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said that, I quote, the UN Secretariat has an obligation to carry out its mandate to examine evidence of Iran's transfer of UAVs to...
It's a little slower,
Oh,
because I'm
sure.
still on vacation. right here.
The UN Secretariat
Yeah.
has an obligation to carry out its mandate to examine evidence of Iran's transfer of UAVs to Russia in violation of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. This was her quote. What does the UN plan to do with this call? Do they plan to send a team to investigate it?
I mean, we are
Ukraine?
continuing to analyze the information received with regard to the alleged transfer of uncrewed aerial vehicles by Iran in a manner that's consistent with paragraph 4 of Resolution 2231.
Is the SG in favor of sending a team?
I will refer you back to what I've just said. Evelyn.
Yes,
there are lots of calls in today's meeting on Yemen for aid, and yet the Yemeni, the Houthis, at any rate, are not allowing women to move around without escorts. So this must be, the UN must have a terrible time. Does the UN have a terrible time in distributing any aid?
I mean, delivering humanitarian aid in Yemen remains challenging. Dawn.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question on Jenin. So the Secretary General gave comments. The Israeli ambassador asked him to retract them about what happened in Jenin. Secretary General hasn't done that as far as I know at this moment. And I'm just wondering, what are the political consequences, if any, for the Secretary General to not act on that request? Does he have to get on the phone with the Israeli ambassador? Has he had
No, I mean,
discussion?
I'm not aware that he's had a discussion with the ambassador. I mean, maybe last week. I'm just not aware of it. I think Fahan was pretty clear on Friday when he said the Secretary General stood by his statement. It is not the first time in history, and even recent history, that this Secretary General has made a statement in which certain member states have asked them to withdraw, and he has not. I mean, he's just stating what his opinion is.
And if I can just ask one more. I was asked on Friday, but I'm going to try again. I know you weren't here. The Secretary General was asked at the stakeout whether or not he thought Israel had committed war crimes. He didn't answer the question. Anything to add?
If he didn't answer the question, I don't think I will. But I think his position on the events that we have seen recently in Jenin, I think was made very clear in what he said to you. Other parts of the system may voice their opinion also in more legal terms. Abdel Hamid.
Thank you, Stéphane, and welcome back. I want to follow up with the diplomat's visit to Jenin. On April 18, 2002, after the first destruction of the same refugee camp by Israel, Terry Rod Larson, the then special envoy of the SG and the Middle East Peace Coordinator, visited the camp, and he said that what he had seen is a brutality beyond imagination. This is an earthquake, that's what he said. Now, Thor Winsland, he didn't visit Jenin, he didn't visit Tormusaya, and he didn't visit Hawara while other diplomats do. Why he doesn't take a step further and go see for himself, being the supreme representative of the United Nations?
Listen, I think I will leave the analysis, the compare and contrast to you and your journalist colleague. I think Mr. Venesland has been extremely vocal and extremely clear, and the whole UN system, I think, has been extremely clear as well. Okay, I will get our guests, and so I'll ask you to stay in your seats. 2 seconds.